Now here's the information I want to share on this video, and I'm sure Vlad would confer with me that, you know, this can happen to anybody. You know, here it is, Honda in America. Well, I don't know. This is paint Vlad bought for his motor. Now, before I go into this little story, I want to show this. We did this. We did a multiple step thing of, let me just get these both under the light at the same time. Well, not an exact match, which is a very common thing. And the reason I wanted to mention this is we're going to be doing a lot of painting in the near future. So here's what happens. You can go and get out, in this case it was a half a pint. And by the way, a half a pint is not enough to do what we were doing. We're going to have to buy more. Vlad came over today. The paint didn't match to his satisfaction, which I would agree. I would tend to agree that it wasn't a good match. But I wanted to make 2 points. Number one, before we go into a color match thing, when you paint a motorcycle, or a significant part of a motorcycle, unless there's a compelling reason, buy a quart of paint. What happens when you buy a pint of paint? I'm gonna embarrass myself here because this is true. Here's Windy. I bought this is 750 green. I got 3/4 of the bike done. I thought I had it done. Well, I go buy another can. There's still a little bit in here. I'll explain why in a minute. And then I realized, what am I doing? I'm playing games here. I'm playing games. What I need is a quart of paint. Now the reason, and I wanted to show this too. You know, I'm trying to share information here. It's not Steven Spielberg stuff, but this paint, let me shake it up a little bit. This is the paint for my Kawasaki, the 750. And this is true of a lot of different colors. If you could see how thin that paint is like very, very thin. So what happens, especially if you paint your hand with it, here's what happens with this. If you're painting something black, yeah, you can get away with a pint of paint, but you can't paint this kind of paint, what I'll call exotic paint, pearl, metallic, flip-flop, chameleon. These exotic colors, you need a lot more physical paint to do it. So anyway, my point was I had gone, bought a pint of paint, used it up, a pint of paint, used all but a little bit of it, and then finally broke down and bought a quart. And you can see there isn't a lot left in the quart. So that's my whole point. What I should have done right in the beginning is buy a quart of paint, and then at the end, if I needed it, buy the pint. Don't buy the pint and then buy the quart. I guess there's some math involved in that. But I did, sometimes it works out that it's all okay. For Vlad, this did not work out okay. For me, it didn't work out okay for one reason. I had this from years and years ago. I had a can of the paint for a Ferrari. It was a Testarossa color. It was a color that I wanted to paint a model plane, and I used it. This is not modern paint. This is old lacquer. But I wanted to match the color. So I had my friends at, and we won't mention any names, but at our local body shop we had, and Luciano says Ray Charles mixed the paint or Stevie Wonder. Well, it was close but no cigar, but I wasn't happy, and so halfway through the whole paint job, I had another color mixed. And this one was a lot closer, but still, I'm not sure. But here's a trick that I found. If you're not happy with this color right now, you get a second one, you're probably going to be unhappy with that one too. What I was thinking at some point in time, I should have mixed all 3 of these together in a gallon can and be done with it. But here's my point too. Especially reds and yellows, they fade over time. So that this can of paint that you just painted the motorcycle with, now 5 years later, 10 years later, you go to match it. Well, the paint is the same, but the paint on the motorcycle has already faded some, so it's not an exact match. Now, can happen to anybody. You think everybody I know is looking to save money, and you're always trying to save money, but there's always some way you cheat yourself. Now, and I'll make my West Cooley thing. I started the West Cooley bike knowing that I wanted the color that bike really, the real West Cooley bikes were. And I had bought the same old thing, a pint of paint, ran out, buy a pint of paint. And I had my friend Bob Brookins, in fact I have his name still up here. What I had is I had him get me a quart of paint too. This is a Ford standard color. Then what I did was the paint I had left over, I had 2 pint cans, and I always save, by the way, this is another trick, I never use the last little bit of paint. The reason is I may have to touch something up. So I never want an empty can. All these cans have just a little bit in them. But I thought with the West Cooley bike, I said, oh boy, that color blue is a very, very special color. It's a color that's on a Ford Mustang. So I said, I'll bank on, because I have 2 of those GS's and I might want to paint the second one. And so what I did, I had Bob mix me up. This is my spare paint for the West Cooley bike is a quart. And it's a quart of paint, which means you put a quart of thin, all modern urethane paint, you put the same thinner in the same paint almost every time. So what happens is, I will have 2 quarts of paint. In other words, if the bike, if I were to have an accident or the paint got scratched, I can repaint the whole bike and still have enough left over. So now, what usually happens, the place I do business with, this is $70, this is $40. So you save $10 right off the bat by getting more than you need. So there's always a saving buying more. And the reason I wanted to say that, here's the best thing of all. Every once in a while, it's your lucky day. Now you notice on the top of this, it says Luciano's 748 Ducati. Glenn had this paint made. And it's yellow, it's a very difficult color to match. But now Luciano just bought a Suzuki that's got some yellow bodywork, and we wanted to match the yellow, and it's a very close match to the Ducati. So we're home for you all by having this extra paint, and there's probably enough in here to do a gas tank or so, but sometimes it just works out to your favor. Here's another thing, if you're painting, and especially these colors, so you have an inch of paint in this can, an inch of paint in this can, you buy a new can of paint. This is a good idea, is pour them all into one can and mix it up. What that does, if there's any discrepancy in the way who mixed the paint, the age of the paint, the fading, and some of these paints, and this one especially, if you don't shake the gun every 30 seconds or you don't stir the paint and get it all that pearl and all that liquid in there, if you don't mix it good, you put the whole motorcycle together, you look and the 2 parts don't match, it can make you crazy. Anyway, we have learned in the past week why I always like to share this information, because we're never going to stop doing this, I guess until we die or whatever. Maybe that's coming soon too, who knows. All of these things that we wind up doing, we learn little lessons along the way. And I've been doing this 52 years and I'm still learning lessons. But all of the lessons I've learned in the last week with all these red colors and all these Bermudas and everything, it has brought back to memory how many things I've done, these mistakes that I've made that are worth sharing. And you can boil it down this way: always buy more paint than you need, always save the last little bit for touch-ups, and never just think, this is the biggest mistake of all, is to go to a body shop with this part, and they take a camera, they take a picture of it, and they mix you a quart of paint, a pint of paint. It almost never matches. But I'm sure, probably the reason is I'm real fussy. Vlad is real fussy. Luciano's real fussy. I know Glenn, and most of the people in our A-team circle of friends are very fussy people. And I'm sure we're not the most fussy in the world, but I would like to think that by knowing the do's and don'ts of doing this, I'm stacking the deck in my favor, that I don't wind up having unnecessary problems. There's enough problems in life. My good friend, lifetime friend, George Venturini, a mason, he was teaching me how to mix concrete one day. This is a great lesson. And I was screwing it up, and I made it too thick and too thin, and not enough stone and not enough sand. And he said, stop! It's hard enough to do masonry work and mix concrete. Don't find ways to make it harder. Well, I hope these little things have helped at least give you some thought, because there's never going to be an end of bikes that need to be painted. There's never going to be an end of people that don't buy enough paint, get paint that doesn't match. But I think by sharing some of the things we've all done wrong and sharing some of that, we can kind of stack the deck in our favor. Again, these colors, and yeah, I can remember this. The guy at the body shop supply said, oh, a pint of paint will be plenty. Well, they don't realize what they're thinking of is a Harley Davidson, a little peanut gas tank, a little piece of fender on each end. That's it. A modern sport bike with the fairings and the upper fairing, the lower belly pan, the seat, and even this Bimoda has a one-piece seat and tank. You need a lot of paint to do that. And these colors, if you think these colors cover one shot, you're crazy. You gotta experience this in real life. The reds and the yellows are a bear to match. They're really, really difficult. So what I'm saying is, and I guess it's the bottom line, unless you're going to paint the whole motorcycle over, that getting the paint mix match right is very, very important. And you can see this is the last thing, and then we're at the end of this point. You can just think of this as a way to think about it. I put almost 3 days of work into these parts. They're nice, but the problem is I'm going to have to do them over. And I'm going to have to do them over only because that paint that says Honda was not a good match to the Bimoda. Anyway, I hope there's something in there that was good food for thought.